Hello friends, SentinalH here and welcome to Grim Dawn. This is an ARPG developed by Crate Entertainment and I've been playing the heck out of it over the past couple of weeks. Some people wanted some video of Grim Dawn, so here it is. I hope that after this video you'll know whether or not you want to pick up Grim Dawn. And if you're a fan of Diablo 2 or the Diablo series in general, I think you will like this game. So, Grim Dawn, first we will run through some of the features. The game has about a single-player campaign that is also playable in multiplayer. So you can join or host multiplayer matches. I believe those go up to 4 players. And there's a whole meta for multiplayer, I would assume. There are 4 difficulties. When you first begin the game, you can select from normal or veteran. The difference between normal and veteran is very slight. You gain better loot on veteran, but you also fight more hero enemies. However, I highly recommend playing veteran instead of normal, even for a first playthrough. In my first playthrough of the game, I played on veteran, skipped normal, and I think the game was perfectly well challenging without being too difficult. So I personally would have found normal a bit too easy. Now that I've switched to elite, you start the game over again, but you keep all of your equipment and gear and your levels, and the game scales up to you and reduces your resistances by 25%. Ultimate will reduce those resistances by 50%, which is going to be a real challenge. The game also has different modes. It's got custom games, and it's got the Crucible, which is a DLC, which adds an arena-style survival thing, which I haven't played yet, that allows you to fight through waves of enemies and receive rewards. So we will now start a new character so that we can see what the game looks like when we first begin it. So I will create a character. Now there's no character customization in this game. You simply choose male or female and name them. There's also hardcore mode. Now on hardcore, if your character dies, they're dead. It's permadeath. So hardcore is definitely hardcore, and the people who play hardcore ultimate, those people, my goodness, that would be stressful for me, because if you make one mistake, your character's dead. But that, that could be your jam. So we'll name this character. We'll call her, what should we call her? We'll call her, I don't know. I can't think of something yet. We'll call her Janna. I don't care. League of Legends character. Who cares? I don't even play Janna. So we'll create, and there we go. There's Janna, level 1. There's no, they always look the same, but since they're covered in gear and viewed from a high angle anyway, it doesn't really matter what they look like. We can only choose normal or veteran. You can't choose elite on a new character, because obviously that would be ridiculous. So we'll set it to veteran difficulty, and we will start the main campaign. One of the things I really like about Grim Dawn is that the loading times are really quick. I'm going to skip this. Loading screens, really, really quick. We got these tutorial tips, which you can disable if you don't want them.
Still drawing you.
There is voice acting in the game. Not everyone is voice acted. Only the main characters are voice acted. Like the main quest givers.
You're not looking too bad for someone just come back from the brink of the
like this guy.
You will need to.
So main character quest givers, they are the ones that are voice acted. Everyone else is not. Like for instance these guys, just text. The game is very competently written, and the voice acting is quite decent, which is always nice. The game also looks really nice. I mean, look at this game. I think the game looks beautiful. It's a grim, Gothic setting. Lots of Gothic architecture, lots of really, dark grittiness. There's also, but it's not all this grim dark stuff. The game has a day-night cycle, and in the day it's actually quite bright. There are some areas that are naturally darker. Now, if you notice something about my character, I did not choose a character class at character creation. Instead, you have to get to level 2 just by beating up the zombies in this starting area before you choose your class. So we'll just beat the crap out of these guys. Our experience meter is down here at the bottom. We only need 8 experience to level up. So we'll beat this guy up, and there we go, level 2. When you level up in this game, you gain a couple of things. one thing that you gain if you go to the character window is 1 attribute point. You can spend this attribute point on either your physique, cunning, or spirit. You cannot take these points back. There is a respec system in the game where you have to pay a very small amount of money to a character in order to take back your skill points, but you can't respec these attributes, so be careful where you place them. Basically, if you're a magic character, you want a lot of spirit. If you're going to be wearing heavy armor, you want physique or carrying really heavy melee weapons. And if you are you want to wield ranged weapons, or if you're going for critical strike build, you're going to want cunning. I can click this button down here to level myself up and choose my training class. There are 6 of these. The soldier is your basic melee character. You can also use the soldier with ranged weapons, but most of their abilities require melee weapons or shields. So if you want a sword and board with a sword and shield, you're going to want a soldier. They've also got a lot of passives that just increase your physical damage. So they make a good, solid class if you're for your dual class. Demolitionists, they are your they use ranged weapons, but you can also use melee weapons with them. They don't gain as much physique and health though. They have fire damage as their primary damaging ability type, and they have a lot of equipment like grenades, flashbangs, stun jacks, deployable turret at late levels that fires mortars, and they set everything on fire and they lob a lot of grenades. I like the Demolitionist. Then we have the Occultist, your basic sort of evil-ish, darker sort of mage. They're basically a chaos mage. They have 2 familiars, the Raven and the Hellhound, that they can summon. They primarily inflict bleeding damage and vitality damage. They can curse their opponents as well as heal themselves through a couple of different means. So, you know, they're pretty nasty guys. The Nightblades are your assassin type character. They specialize in avoiding attacks. They have right from the beginning they get an aura that can reduce the enemy effectiveness. They are the only class that has an ability that lets them dual wield right from the start of the game, and they just quick strikes and crits. That's what the Nightblade does. The Arcanist is your basic wizard. They deal elemental damage. All of their spells. They have spells that deal fire damage, cold, lightning. Unlike the Occultist, who deals primarily poison, chaos, poison and chaos and bleeding, a little bit of bleeding. The Arcanist is all about the elemental. And Shamans, they're basically your druid sort of guys. They wield, they specialize in 2-handed weapons. Swords, so giant swords. They specialize in lightning and just striking everyone with lightning. So it's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and just choose a soldier. Once you choose one, you can place points into things. These are your abilities. The round ones are passives, while the square ones are active abilities. That's how you can tell what those are. So the soldier mostly has passives. So it's a good starting class. Down here we have the mastery bar. You need to put points into this to unlock your abilities. Putting points into it increases your base stats, like your physique, cunning and spirit, health, and energy. Every level that bonus goes up, and this is your main source of base stats. You need to remember to put points into this because, for instance, I can put 16 points into these abilities and 12 points, but if all I'm doing is putting points into these, I can't get any of the other abilities and I'm not getting more stats, so that's not a very good idea. If we look at these starting abilities, we can see that we have this ability called Cadence. This is our default weapon attack. We can use this as our default weapon attack down here on the left mouse button, and it is a better attack than our just basic melee attack, and it has the bonus that on every third strike is more powerful. So we definitely need to put a point into Cadence. We can right click down here on our left mouse button slot and slot Cadence in there in order to equip it. Now we can choose between Force Wave, which requires a shield or 2-handed weapon. It basically stuns and damages your enemies on a 2.8 second cooldown, and this thing right here will modify that. This requires a 2-handed weapon, so you can no longer use this with a shield. It can't trigger effects like this Markovian's Advantage, but it does less damage, but it has a cooldown reduction. Basically, 100% cooldown reduction. You can spam the crap out of Force Wave once you equip Tremor. So that's just a modifier. You can also modify this with Discord. So these are modifiers, the little shard-looking things, and they modify the ability they're attached to. We are going to acquire both of the... Well, we can't acquire both of them, but yeah, there we go. So we've acquired Cadence and we've acquired Force Wave, so I will equip Force Wave to the right mouse button, because why not? It's on a short enough cooldown, and we'll get going. So if I right-click, there's our Force Wave. If we find an enemy to attack... Come on, where are the enemies? Here's some enemies. That's the effect of Cadence. Every third attack does that cool effect and deals more damage. Very nice. I didn't use Force Wave, so let's find some more enemies and use Force Wave on them. There we go. Nice. This is the basic combat of Grim Dawn. That's a pretty long-range ability for a soldier. I'm a fan of the combat. It feels pretty weighty at times. At other times, I will admit, it feels a little less impactful. But with the sheer number of enemies that you'll be fighting as you go through the game, this is not a game where you fight enemies one-on-one. This is a game where you fight hordes, as any ARPG, I believe. I've seen some video of Diablo 3, and man, you fight hordes of enemies in that game. So yeah, you're gonna fight lots of groups of enemies. So pretty cool. So I acquired a component, which is an important part of this game. Basically, you acquire these. You can right-click them and apply them to your weapons. However, if you notice, I can't do that. This is a partial component. You see, 1 of 3. You got to put multiples of these together in order to form the actual component, which you can then apply to your, in this case, weapons, shields, and caster off hands, which will apply whatever the bonus is down there. So fire damage, an increase in % fire damage, and converting physical damage into fire damage. Conversions are important in this game. If you want to deal elemental damages, then you either have to have a skill that deals elemental damages, or you have to modify your weapon in such a way that, with, for instance, that component, that will cause your physical attack damage to be converted into fire damage. Right? So keeping track of which damages you're actually dealing is actually quite important. Alright, so now that we've seen a little bit of this, I will now load into my high-level character so we can take a look at some other stuff. So I have loaded up Alindia, my level 52 Pyromancer, and we can check out some of the things that she's got going on. So if we look in our skill tree, you can see that I've got Demolitionist and Occultist. At level 10, you're able to choose a second class. You cannot undo these choices, so it is very important that you choose wisely. Now, in the basic difficulty modes, basically until you get to legendary difficulty, any of these combinations are viable. However, apparently at high level legendary, there are some combinations that are definitely not as good as others. The Pyromancer, Demolitionist, Occultist combination is a very good one. If you want to dual-wield weapons, deal tons of fire damage, have a decent amount of survivability, and deal a lot of DPS. This is a DPS character. As you can see, if I hold shift, I can attack without a target. I have 2 pistols. My default ability is Fire Strike, which deals fire damage. And everything that I do is about fire damage and chaos. So I have a bunch of passives that I can equip. Like in other ARPGs, equipping these always-on buffs reserves a portion of your mana. You can see it recharging there. I don't have a ton of mana regen. In fact, while using all of my abilities on rotation, I do lose mana. For most of the game, that was not the case. For most of the game, I wasn't using enough mana, and it was constantly able to be full. Let's take a look at my stash so we can see just the wealth of components that the game contains. These are all weapon components, basic components as well as rare components. Things like the Unholy Inscriptions are rare components, while these ones over here are just components. You can also craft components. If we You don't have the ability right from the start of the game, but later in the game you'll acquire a blacksmith, which in this case he would go right here. So things you do in the game do affect the game world, and once you have access to the blacksmith, you can actually craft these higher level components by combining 2 of the lower level components. Okay, so lots of components. Also, you have an item transfer stash, which lets you transfer items between characters. So I acquired a lot of epic gear on my on Alindia, so I stuck it all in here, the stuff I wasn't using, so that later my other character classes will be able to use it. And some of this gear looks really cool. And they're adding more gear all the time. They've recently added some more rare items, more epics, and they're coming out with their first expansion, major story expansion, that will continue the story and as well as add a lot of new stuff. So that's really, really cool. Alright, so let's head down here. This is part of a main quest. We'll head down here and I will show you some high-level gameplay. Even though this is still the beginning area of the game, since I'm on Elite, the enemies will all be around my level. And I'll be able to show you some high-level gameplay with a whole bunch of skills and abilities. So my basic rotation on this character class that I've built here is just to fire everything. When I get into combat, I just roll my fingers across my 1, 2, 3 keys. When they get close, I use 4 to fire off a fire. It's an ability called Demon's Breath. And these abilities debuff the enemies and make them slower so they don't catch up to me as quickly. I also have this buff here that gives me a bunch of health regen. As you can see, my Hellhound familiar is currently tanking. I've only put 1 point into my Hellhound. I'm not specializing in the pets. They're just here to carry buffs and do a bit of distraction. Now, because the game is full 3D, you can actually fire down on enemies that are below you, which is really fun. There's not a whole lot of opportunities to do that. Especially later in the game, you end up in fewer areas like this, and you end up in more outdoor areas. There are often walls that you can break that will either provide shortcuts to other areas. Oh, I better... okay, it's R. R is the short... Whoa! Crap, I'm taking a lot of damage. R is the shortcut key for using health potions, although you can also use 9, which is the default hotkey binding for it. Whew. Alrighty. That was nuts. Elite difficulty. It definitely earns its status here. The reason for that is not just because of the higher level enemies, but because all of my resistances have been reduced by 25%. Alright, now I know that there is, just to show you the breakable walls, I know there's a breakable wall in this area that leads, it's over there, crumbling wall. You can hold the middle mouse button and turn your mouse to rotate the camera view. Keep an eye out for these crumbling walls, because you'll find these chests that provide a lot of good stuff. And there we go. So this is a DPS class, like I mentioned. So I just do a lot of damage. I like this game a lot. There's all kinds of different character classes you can build. I like ranged characters, which is why I went with a ranged character. As you can see, the undead are actually fighting these spiders. The various types of enemies in the game don't get along. Like, just because they're your enemies doesn't mean that they don't fight amongst themselves, and they definitely do. So the zombies are part of the Ethereals, which is actually a faction in the game. They're an enemy faction. And I'll talk about factions now, it's a good segue. While these guys are arachnids, which is their own faction, so they don't get along. I want to show you a couple more things here while we're standing here. If I hit J, let's just get rid of that. If I hit J, I open up the faction screen. As you go through the game, you'll meet these other factions, and you'll gain reputation with them. The hostile factions, you can only become more hated. As you become more hated, they unlock things like extra spawns, extra hero spawns, and eventually a nemesis spawns. This is a very powerful creature of that faction that spawns and specifically tries to hunt you down and kill you. Killing the nemesis is a difficult fight, and apparently it gives you a lot of nice stuff. Yeah. The Chthonians and the Ethereals are the ones you'll be fighting the most of. You also have your faction respect with the various factions in the game. Devil's Crossing is the first one right at the beginning of the game, and unlocking these higher tiers grants you discounts, quests, bounty table access for repeatable quests, as well as access to the quartermasters, which give you faction-specific weapons, armor, and blueprints. So that's how that goes. Also, for character customization, we have the devotion tree, which is an important aspect of the game. This works by every time you find a devotion shrine, which is an object in the game that you have to unlock, you get a devotion point, which you can then spend unlocking one of the stars on the constellation. At the beginning of the game, you have to put a point into the central crossroads, and you unlock these things by acquiring affinity. Every constellation is based on one of these affinities, and you need a certain amount of affinity to put points into it. For example, Ulzuin's Torch, which I'm currently working towards, requires 8 red and 15 green. I am on my way to getting the 8 red and 15 green. I need to finish up the Rowan's Crown down here, which will give me 1 more green and 1 purple. That purple will then allow me to unlock... what was it that I was going to unlock with the purple? I can't remember. It's around here somewhere. I'll have to check it out later. There's a specific one on here that I'm looking to unlock with that 1 purple that'll allow me to get some more of the other ones. I don't know what it is. But yeah, so you work your way through this, and putting points into it unlocks stuff. Like this one, fire damage, fire elemental resistance, and more elemental damage. Whereas some of these are things like pet bonuses, and other ones are just straight up things like offensive ability, but requires a ranged weapon. So there are some of these that are weapon specific. You'll also notice these larger, brighter stars. These add special abilities. So for example, I have the Eldritch Fire ability, which I've attached to my Fire Bombs, my number 2, that I've Blackwater Cocktail. And it has a 42% chance to proc when I throw the cocktail. It gains experience as I use it and as I gain experience, and it levels up, which is really awesome. So Eldritch Fire gives me a 42% chance to for Eldritch Flames to erupt from where my blows land and spread through my enemies, dealing a bunch of fire and chaos damage, reducing their move speed, their fire resistance, and their chaos resistance, which is very nice for me because my primary damages are fire and chaos. So the devotion tree is something that you really want to use to complement your build rather than define your build. But still, you get 50 points throughout the game. I unlocked these 25 points during veteran mode. Now that I'm on elite mode, I can re-unlock these 25 devotion shrines to gain an additional 25 points for a maximum of 50. All of these points can be respec'd by paying a tiny amount of money to a certain character. You can also respec all of your ability points any time, but you cannot respec the mastery points. You can't get these points back. So let's just go through this dungeon and show off some more gameplay. Oof. Lots of spiders. So, yeah, like every other game in this genre, basically, there are giant spiders. So, if you have crippling arachnophobia, I'm sorry to say this might be yet another RPG that you won't be able to play because of spiders. Now, I just collected something called a food ration. This game has a very cool feature, I think, which is endurance. If you notice, there's like a golden glow on my health bar. That's my endurance. You can find certain things in the game that will increase your endurance. Basically, the point of the endurance is that it allows you to quickly heal up after a fight so that you don't have to spend time waiting around for your health to come back. If you take damage during combat, your endurance will drain in order to quickly restore your health. I'm just debuffing these enemies. I have a lot of health regen. Oh, that did a lot of damage. Holy cow. That one attack did half my health. That's because of my resistance reductions. I actually have negative resistances to cold and lightning right now. And these guys deal those damages. That's because towards the end of the game, you fight a lot of the Chthonian enemies, which primarily deal chaos damage. So I threw a bunch of components on my gear and to make sure I had a ton of chaos resistance. I got it up to 86%, and that allowed me to defeat the final boss of the main story, which does not end the game, of course. You just keep playing. The completion of that was a little bit disappointing, actually, if I'm completely honest. But that's because the main story is not been completed. Basically, what's currently in the game is essentially the first chunk of the story. And then once they are working on the expansion that will continue the story. And so definitely looking forward to that.
Can't do that yet.
So the game is being actively developed. Very cool stuff. Just keep throwing stuff. So the class that I've made here only uses a handful of abilities. And a lot of my abilities are one-point wonders. But you can create characters that essentially only use, like, you can create characters you can play one-handed. Usually like melee characters like the shaman or soldier. You could probably play one-handed. Whereas other characters might have 11 different abilities that you have to, you know, roll around on your keyboard to play.
That skill's not ready.
I try and avoid that usually. I always forget to use abilities. So if I had too many of them, it would not be a good thing for me. Here's the boss. This is the boss of this dungeon that we're here to kill for the main quest. She's dealing cold damage, which of course I lack resistance to at the moment.
That skill's not ready.
So, and poison damage, which I also lack resistances to. So she's able to deal a lot of damage, but we killed her. And we got her gear. Now when you kill heroes or bosses, a lot of their gear drops in a single sphere in order to keep gear from completely covering your view and messing you up. But you then have to just shoot it once or attack it once and it will spew out all the stuff. I want to find a devotion shrine, but there aren't any down here, so we have to leave. And we will head... Okay, there's one over there at this ruined shrine. So we'll go over here, and we will go find that devotion shrine so that you can see what that is all about. I know where it is. It's up here. I already went through this area before, but the game uses a session system. Since this is the only ARPG I've played other than Diablo, the original, I don't know how, you know, that might be widespread, you know. I don't really know anything about how widespread these session-based systems are. Basically, the way it works is that enemies don't respawn except when you start a new session. And the dungeons in the game, the extremely dangerous dungeons that I can't show you because I haven't gotten to that point yet on this elite character now, but also because you need a special item called a skeleton key. They're dungeons where you fight very high level enemies that are always higher level than you. In a dungeon you cannot leave until you either die or complete it by killing the final boss. But you get a lot of really high level gear. In fact, you don't get anything. You don't find any gear that's not enchanted. Like, all the gear you pick up is at least the lowest tier of enchanted gear, magical gear. So those roguelike dungeons are really cool. If you want to see another video of Grim Dawn where I run through a roguelike dungeon, let me know, because I can very easily do that. These stupid ethereal crystals are dealing damage to me from quite a long distance away. Yeah, see, now when you start a new session, even the bosses come back. So that's how you farm the bosses for components and items and stuff. And a new session means that you just went back to the main menu. So all you gotta do is go back to the main menu, and that begins a new session, which will respawn all the enemies and all the bosses. So, killed that guy, got some good stuff that I'll sell. At this point, with the current gear that I've got, it's not really worth it for me to use anything that's not at least a rare. And the elite items, which are the blue ones, they actually can give you special abilities that proc as a percentage chance to proc on attacks and things of that nature. I don't even pick up the white stuff. This is a devotion shrine. It's a ruined shrine. If you click on it, it shows up on the map. If you click on it, it will ask for a certain number of items. In this case, it's asking for 3 aether crystals. If you have those items, which I do, you can click offer. The shrine will give you a large number of items, but more importantly, it will unlock a devotion point. So now I have a devotion point to spend. I am going to come down here and spend it in this constellation, which is called Rowan's Crown. I'm going to get 20 spirit and a bonus to elemental damage on my pets. I'm really doing Rowan's Crown to get Elemental Storm and to get the purple affinity. When you complete an entire constellation, you gain affinities, which will allow you to unlock other constellations. So that's a devotion shrine. Devotion shrines are a big part of the game, and you definitely want to unlock all of them that you find. If you find a devotion shrine, you want to unlock it. Don't ever leave a devotion shrine ununlocked. Because you can fast travel at any time, you can go back to a base area to get items out of your stash. Oh, ooh, crap, almost died there. Not exactly sure what almost killed me. Now, death isn't that big of a deal. When you die, you do lose experience. However, it spawns a grave marker on the ground, and if you go back to that location and grab your grave marker, you do get most of the experience back. At any point, you can press L or click that button to spawn a rift, which allows you to travel to any of the other rifts which you have unlocked, which are all these question marks. So I'm going to travel out to Devil's Crossing, which will allow me to turn in quests, and that rift stays on the map. So if you then go to a placed rift like this, you can fast travel right back to your rift. Very, very useful. So we have slain the creature.
Well done.
And now, if you notice, this water over here is no longer green, because the reason we killed that creature down in there in the underground was because they were poisoning the water supply. Now this water is nice and blue. Wonderful. Now, another thing about this game is that the way that the game gates off areas is by these bridges. So you need scrap and money to fix these bridges. I can obviously repair it because I have 580,000 iron pieces, and I've got 55 scrap because this is an elite character. I've played through the game already on veteran, and I've already acquired a ton of money. Now, a good thing about this game is that you do acquire a lot of gear. I didn't have to buy any of the gear that I'm currently using. I've never bought gear on this character, and I have some very high level stuff. Just find it from the enemies. This is the quartermaster. Every settlement has one. Devil's Crossing has one. The homestead has one, and the major faction of that area will sell you stuff once you've reached a certain level of respect with them. And in this case, you got to reach respected, which you need to have a minimum of I think it's like, what is it, like 2,000 something respect to get this, and then you can buy these higher level faction specific gear. And these blueprints that they sell are especially important. For example, when I wanted to use dual weapons, I needed the Gunslinger's Talisman because it allowed me to dual wield weapons. I still have it on, even though I don't need it, because this spell also lets me dual wield. Just to show you what I've got on, there are epic items tend to have set bonuses. This Brimstone Shoulder Guard and this Eyes of Flame helmet have a set bonus. I've only got 2 out of the 3, but they increase my fire and burn damage, which is really great. I've currently got the Marauder's Fury, the Marauder's Ammo Belt, and the Marauder's Gloves, which are currently giving me extra fire and a little bit of cold damage. This is also quite a good gun. If I find another Mediator, though, I'm definitely going to equip that instead. And these are your resistances over here. Currently have some negative ones. Negative resistances are only possible if you're afflicted by enemies that reduce your resistances, or, like me, you're playing on elite difficulty. Now, you'll notice this is my main inventory window down here. I've also got these side bags. You acquire these throughout the course of the game by doing quests, mostly for a faction called the Rovers. As you do quests for them, they will give you additional bags. So you're never really lacking on inventory space. Especially since when your inventory is full, you can just rift back to base, sell it, and you're good to go. So this is Grim Dawn. I very much like it. You can hold shift and click to put stuff into stash. I of course stash all of my crafting components, because if I didn't, I would run out of inventory space. And now I can just put them together to make the fully usable version. So anyway, that's Grim Dawn. I like this game a lot. I think it looks great. It's got a great art style. It's got a great theme. I like the sort of Gothic style to the world with the sort of magical apocalypse theme. It's very, very cool. So if this looked interesting to you, I highly recommend picking up Grim Dawn. You can pick it up on Steam or on GOG. It's not overly expensive. It's about $20. And it took me about 2 weeks of playing this game for several hours a day to complete the main quest line, because I was doing a lot of side questing. So it's definitely got enough content to keep you interested. It's very replayable, and the devs are working on that story expansion, so that's going to make it even better. So I definitely think this game has more than enough content to keep you happy. So if you like what you saw, go pick it up. The developers have done a great job. If you want to see more Grim Dawn, let me know. I can run through a roguelike dungeon so you can see how crazy that is. That might be fun. Or if you want to see the Crucible mode, let me know. Anyway, don't forget to join our Discord in the link in the description. Follow me on Twitter if you want to get notifications when I stream, because I do want to start streaming again, as well as when I upload videos. I'm SentinalH, and I'm signing out.